climate change adaptation based in Bangkok. And I'll be talking about water management in a changing climate.
Okay.
Right. So I was going to sort of introduce you to sort of emerging evidence of climate change and also the impact climate change has on various water-related disasters. But because there are other experts on the panel, I'm going to skip this and jump straight into the summary of projected climate parameters. And I'm going to even sort of run through the existing summaries. In the Asia region in general, we are expected to see an increase in the overall rainfall, but there are still a lot of uncertainty about the risks of droughts. But one thing we can say about future climate change is that climate change will definitely pose serious challenges in the distribution of water across geographical regions and across different time periods. We saw this in the opening speeches as well, but it's more likely to see too much water in a given location in a given time and too little water in different location at the same time. So the distribution of water is going to be a big challenge in the future. Now, in this slide, I'm showing you several transmission channels of how water-related climate risks translate into human development impact. This is just a glimpse of many transmissions and interdependencies, but the point of this slide is how the ultimate human development impact in terms of food and water security can be undermined through multiple channels. You're seeing a few examples here. Sea level rise and intensifying cyclones combined can, for example, cause saltwater intrusion into freshwater bodies. They damage infrastructure and livelihood assets, and so on. These are some of the transmission channels of how climate risks can translate into human development impact. And understanding multifaceted implications of water-related disasters is extremely important in devising effective solutions. In the next few slides, I'm going to show you a few examples of how UNDP is currently supporting countries in this region in terms of water management in various forms and shapes. The first example is from the Philippines. In the Philippines, one of the projects that we have supported was the provision of crop insurance to support farmers to cope with variable rainfall in Mindanao. That was one form of support. And right now we're in the process of starting a new project that focuses on ecosystem-based coastal management to cope with typhoons that are expected to be stronger or more frequent. And you're seeing 4 simulation results in the slides. When you see an upper left-hand side slide, you see sort of blue areas in the white map. This shows a current inundation in 1 in a 50-year cyclone event with existing stock of coastal ecosystems, which comprises of mangroves, coral reefs, and seagrasses. So this is the kind of level of inundation that's expected in a 1 in a 50-year typhoon. And you can see the depth of inundation. If you look over to the right, upper right-hand side, this is a result of a different simulation where we lost all ecosystems, all coastal ecosystems. And once the same cyclone or typhoon hits the same area, you can see that the inundation area expands, and also inundation depth also increases. So these two panels show how existing coastal ecosystems are playing a very important role in reducing potential flood and damages from floods. And lower two panels show future scenarios. In 2050, that's a lower left-hand side, still the same strength of typhoon, 1 in 50-year typhoon, and assuming all ecosystems are lost, you see an even further increase in the inundation area and the depth. And when you look at into the future, further into the future, 2100, with all ecosystem lost, you're going to expect even larger damages. So based on this, we're promoting ecosystem-based coastal management by working with coastal communities in regenerating and also managing coastal ecosystems, mangroves, coral reefs, and seagrasses. And second example is from Sri Lanka. The picture that you're seeing is an image of ancient waterways. You see a few reservoirs. These reservoirs were used in ancient Sri Lanka, but it's been sort of lost over time. But we're working with the government to rehabilitate these old reservoirs that use the local sort of topographical features to deliver water to agricultural fields. So this is a sort of one form of ecosystem adaptation as well, because we're using the natural features of the existing ecosystem. And at the same time, we're working with farmers to provide training on climate resilient agriculture and water savings techniques and so on. Next example is from Vietnam. Here we're working with the government to provide last mile irrigation connection to vulnerable and ethnic minority farmers, and also upgrading communal ponds for rain-fed farmers. So this is another example of water management that UNDP is currently helping. And this is the last example from the region in Myanmar. We're working with local communities in rehabilitating degraded watersheds by planting trees in micro watersheds, construction of community irrigation channels and ponds, and introduction of climate resilient agriculture. And I want to share with you some of the lessons learned from implementing these interventions. Obviously, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. As you saw through the 4 examples, we need to tailor our solutions based on the local context and needs. This may sound really obvious, but it's actually very important when we think about effective and sustainable solutions on the ground. And there are multiple channels of support. Typically, we think of top-down initiatives led by central ministries like Ministry of Water, Ministry of Agriculture, and that's certainly one way of support. But increasingly, support through local administrations is becoming really important, because local administrations tend to be able to sort of tailor their supports to the local needs compared with central ministries. There are also supports through NGOs, CSOs, and other community groups. If you're representing a government, this may sound like that's unrelated to your work, but actually there's a lot of important role that the government can play by creating enabling conditions for these NGOs and CSOs and community groups to work better and more effectively with community members. So depending on solutions, there are different delivery mechanisms that work better. So it's important to think about, what's the effective delivery channel for a given support. And I want to sort of end this slide with this key principle, especially if you are representing a government and if you're thinking about, what's the key principle that you should keep in your mind when you think about effective water management solutions. And I think, resilience cannot be built if communities are not empowered, and communities cannot be empowered if they're not engaged, and communities cannot be engaged if they're not informed. So even though there is no one-size-fits-all solution, one thing that's common for effective water management and effective climate change adaptation in general is that effective engagement of local communities and informed engagement of those communities in the solution is actually a critical ingredient for long-term resilience of the community. And here are the last couple of slides for me. I was also asked to include some recommendations for the private sector. And again, it's quite difficult to come up with recommendation that works for everybody from the private sector, because you can think of different actions depending on what kind of a company that you belong to and what sector that you are operating in. Of course, the actions you can take will be vastly different if, for example, you are representing a global financial institution, or if you are from a micro enterprise from Myanmar. But here are some of the key principles again. First, I think it's important to raise awareness about your company's operation, no matter how big your company is and what sector you are from. By raising awareness, I mean these things. What is the environmental footprint of your company's operations? And what are negative externalities that you're producing as a result of your operations? And how can you internalize some of these negative externalities? Whether it's pollution, whether it's disempowerment that you may be causing to local communities. And who is it that's engaged in your supply chain? Are they made more vulnerable because of climate change? This is another important question that you can ask yourself. And where along the supply chain can you reduce emissions or build resilience? This is another important question that you can ask. And second principle is to know what others are doing. And here are three examples that I'm just including in my slide. One is a Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. This is a coalition of financial institutions that have come together during the Glasgow COP and made commitments to achieve a net zero society before 2050. So even though this may be a different sector from where you are representing, but financial institutions have come together and made commitment to achieve zero carbon society. And second and third examples or bullets that you are seeing here are actually unrelated to climate change. One is ESG information disclosure, and second is business and human rights. These two principles or concepts are gaining currencies in the last few years. And I think there's a lot to learn from these initiatives. Why our companies are becoming more and more interested in ESG, environment and social and governance related work, and why our companies getting more interested in business and human rights. These entry points may appear unrelated to climate change, But in my view, making your business more responsible and accountable in whatever the business you're doing is actually a very effective way in the long run to make positive contributions to the society from the perspective of climate change and water. And one last point before I end my presentation is I really encourage you to read the Agenda 2030. This Agenda 2030 is a foundational document for the SDGs. You may be familiar with the 17 SDGs, but Agenda 2030 goes a little bit deeper than the 17 goals and provides you with a little more details about the background of the 17 goals and even the trade-offs that may exist between different goals. So reading the Agenda 2030s with your operations in the back of your mind, how does your business impact different aspects of SDGs is, I think, a good way to start thinking about how you can make contributions in terms of climate change and water management. So I'll end my presentation here. Thank you very much.